Thousands of men died on a single battlefield. And the object both sides were fighting over, the prize so valuable it justified all of it, was a wooden bucket. This actually happened. And that bucket still exists today, locked in a tower, 600 years later. To understand this war, you first need to understand that medieval Italy wasn't one country. It was a patchwork of independent city-states, constantly competing for power, trade, and territory. And running through nearly all of it was one massive political divide. The Guelphs, who backed the Pope, versus the Ghibellines, who backed the Holy Roman Emperor. Bologna was Guelph. Modena was Ghibelline, and they'd been neighbors, rivals, and occasional enemies for generations. This wasn't a friendship that suddenly soured. It was a rivalry with deep roots, built on decades of border raids, shifting alliances, and mutual resentment. By 1325, tensions were already running dangerously high. Modena had recently captured a fortress belonging to Bologna, a serious military provocation. Bologna was furious and looking for a reason, any reason, to strike back. And that's the environment a small group of Modenese soldiers walked into when they decided to pull off a prank. One night, a handful of Modenese soldiers slipped into Bolognese territory. This kind of small-scale raid was actually common between the two cities, stealing livestock, damaging crops, harassing villagers. Nothing new. But this time they found something different. A plain wooden bucket sitting at a public well, and for reasons historians still debate, they took it. Maybe as a trophy, maybe as a joke, maybe just because it was there. Either way, they carried this ordinary bucket back across the border, delighted with themselves. When Bologna discovered their bucket was missing, they were furious, or at least they used that fury as justification. They formally demanded its return. Modena refused, and that refusal became the spark that lit an already loaded political powder keg. Bologna assembled a massive force, somewhere around 32,000 men, bolstered by allies from Florence and Lucca. Modena, in comparison, could gather roughly 7,000, but their army included seasoned German soldiers sent by the emperor himself, professionals in a force otherwise made up mostly of raw citizen militia on the Bolognese side. On November the 15th, 1325, these two armies collided near a village called Zappolino. On paper, this should not have been close. Bologna outnumbered Modena by more than 4-1. But numbers don't automatically win wars. Discipline, terrain, and experience matter just as much, sometimes more. The Bolognese forces, largely untrained citizen soldiers, struggled to hold formation. The Modenese, anchored by professional German cavalry and infantry, fought with far more coordination and control. Within roughly 2 hours, the battle was decided. Modena had won decisively, leaving an estimated 2,000 men dead on the field. 2,000 deaths over a war that, on the surface, traces back to a single missing bucket. And here's the detail that turns this from just a tragic footnote into something almost darkly comic. After their victory, the triumphant Modenese soldiers didn't just celebrate. They went out of their way to retrieve that original bucket, the literal, actual pail from the well, and paraded it back into their city as a war trophy. Not a captured banner, not a captured weapon, a bucket. Here's what modern historians generally agree on. The bucket almost certainly wasn't the real cause of this war. It was a convenient excuse, a symbolic trigger for a conflict that had been building for decades over territory, religion, and political power. The stolen fortress, the years of raids, the deep Guelph-Ghibelline divide, that's what actually started this war. The bucket just gave it a story people could remember, and maybe that's the most human part of this whole thing. We like clean, simple explanations for complicated conflicts. They stole our bucket is a much easier story to tell, and to remember for 700 years than decades of political rivalry finally boiled over. That bucket, by the way, is still on display today, inside a tower in Modena called the Torre della Ghirlandina. Tourists can go see it, the actual, or at least allegedly actual, cause of a war that killed 2,000 people, sitting quietly behind glass. So the next time someone tells you a conflict makes no sense, remember, an entire medieval war was fought, and thousands of people died over a wooden bucket that's now just a tourist attraction in a small Italian tower. History doesn't get much stranger than that. If you want more true stories, this bizarre, subscribe. Because history is a lot weirder than anyone gives it credit for, and we're just getting started.